Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video, we're going to begin our investigation on the Wheelhorse Raider 9's engine. You may remember a few weeks ago we got this tractor running, and the link to those videos will be up in the top right hand corner of your screen. But initial observations then were that it smoked quite a lot. We noticed the head gasket was leaking here. The throttle pin here that goes down to the butterfly has quite a lot of play in it and might be letting air in, and the valves were very noisy. Now, we've had engines in the past that have had one of these problems and have run really badly because of it, but this tractor seems to have all of those problems and seems to actually run alright, which is slightly concerning because we don't want to do something to try and fix the problem and end up making the tractor run worse. But let's get into the investigation. The first thing we're going to check is the compression by doing a compression test. Now, it's probably not going to be dreadfully reliable on this engine because we believe it has a compression release on it. So I'll just take out the spark plug. Quickly. You can see how oily that is, which should definitely not be that oily, since we've only gone around the garden a few times. And we think that, we're not sure because we couldn't find any things online or anything for compression figures for this engine. However, we do believe that it should be around 90 psi. Now, to run the compression test, I'll let you watch the gauge. So as you will have seen there, the gauge says 65 psi, which is really not good. That's quite low. So what we're going to do next is put a couple of drops of oil in the spark plug hole there and do a wet compression test to see what difference, if any, that makes. So as you saw on the gauge there, the compression really didn't change that much between the two tests, which points to a possible valve problem. Something else we did notice, if I get the torch, you can actually see a lot of oil that's leaked out from the bottom of the valve cover there, which could be a possible cause for our smoking problem. We're not sure though. So what we're going to do is try and follow this first lead. So we're going to take off the carburetor to get a bit more space to access the valve cover. The carburetor is off and the valve cover, and we've measured the gaps on the valves, which the inlet should be 10 thousandths of an inch, and the exhaust should be 20, which the exhaust is actually 23, so that's not massively out. But the inlet is 24, which is quite wildly out actually. But the next thing we're going to be doing is taking the head off. We've loosened off the head bolts now, but we're going to have to take off the flywheel cowling here, which also means taking off this, which we'll do in a second. However, we have made up this cardboard template here of the stud pattern of the head bolts. And we've labelled which way around it goes. So what we're going to use this for is when we take out each of the head bolts, we're going to put them into their relevant place on the template, so that if any of them are a different length, because I haven't a clue if any of them are a different length, then that will make sure that they go back in the same hole as they came out of. We've got the flywheel cowling off already, and what I'm doing now is just working these two bolts next to the exhaust, and that is because they were extremely tight when we tried undoing them, so just cleaning up the threads and putting a bit of gentle heat through them before we take them off. We've undone all of the head bolts now. As we were undoing some of them, the head did move around a bit, so that shows that the head gasket really isn't doing too much as we expected. But we haven't looked underneath it yet, so you'll see at the same time we will, and we'll do a bit of a visual inspection. Lots of oil on that. I can't exactly see any scratches on the bore. We've had a bit of a general clear up on the head and the piston and in the cylinder, which there's no marks or obvious marks on the top of the piston to say that it's been oversized or that the cylinder's been rebored. Which we've been doing some rough measurements of the top of the cylinder. One with this, which is a telescopic gauge, and how this works is these bits move in and out, and you can put that in there and then lock it, and then you take it out and measure it. And we've also made a measurement with this. This is a dial bore gauge, which is probably a bit more accurate than the telescopic gauge. But obviously we can't measure the bottom of the stroke of the piston because there's a piston in the way there. So the next point of inspection for today, or the last point of inspection for today, will be taking the valves out. Now to take the valves out, you need to compress the springs and then take the retainer thingies off. Now, one thing we have done in preparation is put a bit of rag in the hole that goes to the sump, because we don't want the retainer thingies to fall down there. Now, what we used to do for this job is use cast valve spring compressors, which go on the bottom of the springs and then onto the top of the valve to compress them. But that was quite tight getting it in there. So after the last valve job we did, we bought these, which are genuine Briggs & Stratton valve spring compressors, which hopefully these should work with the Tecumseh engine. I don't see why they won't. But we'll be using these to do the spring compressing on this engine. And we won't be videoing it because it's quite fiddly trying to do it. We have both of the valves out now. This one's the inlet valve. As you can see, it's not too bad. There was a bit of oil on it, but we've cleaned it up. And then the exhaust's got quite a lot more carbon, and the seat isn't too good on this one. Now looking at the valve seats on here, they're a bit pitted, but nothing too bad, which pretty much summarises everything we've found today with this engine. Is not too bad, which could suggest that it's just as simple as new piston rings and a cylinder hone. However, what we're going to go and do now is have a look on the internet and see what parts are actually available for this engine before we start pulling anything more apart. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.